Coming up on Bridge City News, another Lethbridge business has closed temporarily due to concerns over COVID-19. A local group is wanting to stuff a bus to support needy kids in our city as they prepare to go back to school. And Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is not happy that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is not in the House to answer questions about the We Charity scandal.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta is set to reopen schools this September with 750,000 students returning to school. Now, the province made the announcement today after consulting with school boards and health authorities following its closure in March due to COVID-19. Officials say the province balanced the impact of reopening schools against the impact of keeping them closed. Some negative impacts of school closures have been some children being stuck in impoverished situations with no contact. Also, some parents have been forced to stay home, which has hit moms especially hard.
But everybody acknowledges that it's also been a struggle to balance taking care of their school-aged children and keeping up with their schoolwork while working from home on their full-time jobs. And the vast majority agree it's time to get back to normal, or as normal as we can, and to get kids back to school. In fact, a survey of more than 65,000 parents done by the Alberta School Councils Association found that 86% of parents supported a return to school plan for this fall.
Government officials say re-entry school kits will be made available. Students will take fewer classes in order to accommodate physical distancing, and schools will continue to emphasize health measures like hand washing to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. According to the Alberta government's latest numbers, the South Zone has 22 new cases of COVID-19 for a total of 37 active cases in the region. The Water Tower Grill in Lethbridge was forced to temporarily close its doors because of the virus. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly is at the Water Tower and has more.
According to a Facebook post from the Water Tower Grill, an employee came into close contact with a confirmed case of COVID-19. This happened outside of work hours, and reports are saying that it likely occurred after a family barbecue this weekend. All employees are being tested for the virus, and the Telegraph Tap House, which runs under the same owner, will also be closing its doors temporarily. I spoke to the owner, and he says he's doing this for the safety of the community.
If we all tested and then we quarantine ourselves if we have got a positive test, then we would slow down the process and we all can go outside and be safe. But if we don't know and if we keep it in dark, so it'll be too confusing for the whole market and for everyone else. So I want to be safe myself as a business owner, and I also want to protect my employees because we are 68 people working side by side, and it is too big of a risk.
Alberta added more than 300 cases of COVID-19, and active infections have passed the 1,000 mark once again. The province has logged 165 cases on Friday, 106 on Saturday, and 97 more on Sunday. 3 more Albertans also died from the virus, bringing the total number to 172. Dr. Howard New says holding back COVID-19 takes a combination of public health measures and responsible personal behavior. Dr. New says he's worried about the increase in cases in many Canadian jurisdictions, but says solving it is not as simple as ordering bars and restaurants to close.
We were averaging about 300 cases a day, with a 7-day rolling average. And then more recently, that's increased to 350. And now we're in the neighborhood of about 460 cases per day for the last 4 days or so. So that is of concern. We've done some analysis. I think the province and territories have obviously done their own analysis. And what we're noticing, and it's something that I do want to highlight, is that it seems that the vast majority or the increase in proportion of cases is among what we call young adults. Whereas, for example, back in May, it was a smaller percentage, maybe a third of cases across the board in Canada. More recently, it's been about 55%, and that is concerning.
The RCMP in Coaldale seized over $100,000 worth of stolen property from a Coaldale storage unit.
What we want to do is tell the public a couple things. One, we've recovered a fair amount of stolen property. We've been very fortunate in identifying property owners and return a lot of the property. We had things like welders, trailers, compressors, assorted tools recovered. And again, a lot of those tools and welders were returned to owners, but we still have some available. So If anybody's missing some stolen property, have them contact the Coaldale RCMP and give us a description of what they're missing, and we'll try to determine whether we can return some property to owners. Some of the problems that we have is people don't mark their tools, don't mark their property, so it's very difficult for us to find those owners.
52-year-old Gerald Thurber faces a total of 46 charges. He's been remanded in custody to July 27th, where he will next appear at Lethbridge Provincial Court. The Edmonton Eskimos announced today that they will be changing their team name. The club made the announcement this afternoon following criticism from many in the Inuit community who said the name Eskimo was offensive. The team said its board of directors made the decision to discontinue the use of the word Eskimo. Until a new name is chosen, the CFL team will be known simply as the Edmonton Football Team or the Double E Football Team. Club president Chris Preston says there's no deadline to pick a new team name, but they want one that properly reflects the culture and people of Edmonton. Former U of L Pronghorns women's hockey coach Doug Paisley has found a new home. Paisley will take over as Coaldale Copperheads head coach. Paisley says that it's a natural transition, and he's already developed relationships with some of the players.
For me, it's actually a little bit of a homecoming. I played, it wasn't the Coaldale Copperheads back then, but the local junior B team 30 years ago. So it's good. It's exciting. I'll know the kids. There's a number of kids that have graduated from the AAA midget programs that I coached, and so a bunch of the guys reached out last night when the news broke, and I got a bunch of texts. So it's good. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. The age category is attractive. I like that 18 plus, that junior aged mindset is a little different. They're a little more mature and grown a little bit, and their desire. They're in post-secondary. It's as much as it's different from the girls because it is a different game. The mindset is similar. The work ethic is similar. The commitment level is similar.
With the COVID-19 pandemic still ongoing, the HJHL has yet to announce its return to play. My City Care is looking for items for their Stuff the Bus campaign. The goal for Stuff the Bus is to help out underprivileged families who have school-age children. They'll be providing the items the students need for the upcoming school year. Backpacks are being filled with items, and Jen Tribble, the director with My City Care, said that they will be accepting donations right up until the end of August.
We need everything from pencils and paper to scissors to crayons, just basically all your back-to-school essentials. If somebody needs a detailed list, we can provide one for them. If they're looking at collecting donations or that kind of thing, we can provide a list that we would be putting in each of the backpacks. So everyone's kind of still waiting to find out if school's going to be returning as per normal, or if we're looking at kind of a 50-50, half online, half in the classroom kind of scenario. So people are excited, but it's also one of those things that people are it's a bit unknown right now. So we're just prepared for either scenario. So if we need to give supplies for students that would be doing homeschool or working at home, we can provide backpacks that would be suited for that, or in the classroom. So last year we had just over 600 kids that were helped locally by the Stuff the Bus program, and this year we're projecting to be around the 800 mark.
For more information, or you can learn how you can get involved with the Stuff the Bus campaign, you can visit the My City Care website. New West Theatre has been putting on old-time radio plays and streaming them to the public. Now, the last radio play is taking place on July 23rd, and the artistic director, Kelly Ray, says these radio plays will feature Flash Gordon and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
It's a real tip of the hat to that 1930s adventure serial programming that aired on the radio at the time. So it's a Flash Gordon double feature, so 2 episodes of the classic Flash Gordon series wrapped around the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. So the program will be Flash Gordon Part 1, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Flash Gordon Part 2, just to really kind of embrace that old-time feel of, next week on Flash Gordon. And we're having lots of fun with it.
Starting August 12th, New West Theatre will be doing Live at the Drive-In at Exhibition Park, featuring radio jukebox classics and performances. Due to COVID-19, we've all been at home and inside more than usual. So if you're looking for an outlet for your children to have a little bit of fun outside, then we've got some details on one summer camp that'll be a perfect fit. Loris Alexander has the details.
2 years ago when I bought this place, there was a real need for the kids to associate with the animals. It's not something that the city kids get anymore. And there's not many of us that are involved with agriculture anymore. So with the pot-bellied pigs, the baby bunnies, the puppies, all that's designed for the kids to get in touch with these animals and understand how they work and maybe bring out that gentler side of themselves.
Here's what some of the happy campers had to say about their experiences.
We take turns like writing and art, riding, and then other stuff, so it's kind of fun. What I love about the camp is there's pups and horses. I've been seeing the little puppies here a lot, and I've got to been holding them. There's only 2, and they've both have been sold, but the owners just haven't came to keep them.
And of course, all fun aside, COVID-19 protocols were still in place.
Well, we've got, of course, all the sanitization is in effect. Group sizes are small, and we're really, watching that as everyone comes in, they're disinfected, and things are taken care of. The tack is all sprayed down in between and everything. So we're taking all the precautions.
It feels different now. Like in the news, they said it would never be the same after. It feels like that, even though, well, we are back outside still, kind of feels different.
Snow says while a camp dedicated to horseback riding is a learning experience all of its own, a few other old school activities can add to the fun.
We do a bunch of games that are like the old-fashioned family reunion games, tug-of-war and three-legged races, and these kids their t-shirts come out dirty and they're grinning and they're laughing and they've got grass stains and they've just got in touch with some good old-fashioned fun. 0 screen time. There's no screens around here.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The union representing the driver of a tourist bus that rolled in Jasper National Park on the weekend says the accident hits home for thousands of transit workers who take passenger safety seriously. John Danino, the Amalgamated Transit Union's Canadian president, said the driver remains in hospital and the family has requested privacy. RCMP say no cause has been found yet for the rollover that killed 3 people and injured 24 others. So far, a rock slide has been ruled out. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is skipping out on his duty to answer for the aborted plan to have the We Charity administer a $912 million volunteer program. The Liberals recalled the House of Commons to pass a COVID-19 aid bill, which means ministers face questioning by the opposition parties, but Trudeau took the day off.
The Liberals' new wage subsidy is a complex web of rules and regulations that will trap businesses in paperwork and accounting fees, making it harder for them to get the help they need. This is further proof of the fact that Justin Trudeau has no plan to help Canadians get back on their feet or to restart our economy. Now, I plan to ask the Prime Minister about his lack of a plan today. I also plan to ask him about his $900 million scandal and ask him when he would be appearing at committee to testify. But instead of showing up to answer questions, as he said he would last week, he's taking a personal day today. He chose the date at which the House of Commons would convene, and he's not showing up for work today.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the number of Liberals who were involved in the We Charity scandal speaks to a deep problem within the governing party.
But our concern is that it's not just about the Prime Minister, and it's not limited to the Prime Minister. The Finance Minister is implicated in the scandal because of his family member that benefit from being paid by this organization. There's an implication of the involvement of the Chief of Staff. There's also suggestions that more Liberal Party members are implicated. And so that's why it's so important for the Ethics Commissioner to do his work, for the committee to ask those questions, to get to the details, because it's not just about the Prime Minister. This is something that touches the entire Liberal Party.
A parliamentary committee says it's too dangerous for the House of Commons to get back to business as usual in September. It is recommending that all MPs be equipped with high-quality audio equipment so they can participate in debates and vote from their home ridings. The committee does not want to see MPs gathering in large numbers because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Conservatives are still pushing for a limited number of MPs to gather in Ottawa in person. The Tourism Industry Association of British Columbia won $680 million from Ottawa's $1.5 billion COVID-19 recovery package. The coalition of more than 19,000 tourism and hospitality businesses said that amount could save around 100,000 jobs this year alone. The association says existing stimulus packages are helpful, but are not enough to revive a sector in which 300,000 jobs were affected at the height of the pandemic. BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says she's concerned that 102 new cases of COVID-19 have been detected since last Friday. She says residents need to keep their social interactions low in order to push the so-called curve down from the outbreak.
We have 3 reporting periods. Between Friday and Saturday, we had an additional 51 cases in BC. From Saturday to Sunday, 19 cases. And from Sunday to today, 32 people who tested positive, giving us a total of 102 new cases since Friday, 4 of whom were epi-linked. That brings our total number of people with COVID-19 in British Columbia to 3,300. We're starting to see an upward bend of our curve. This is where we have wanted to make sure we continue to keep our curve flat, that we keep our contacts safe even as we increase the numbers. What this shows is that we do have a possibility of having explosive growth in our outbreak here in BC if we're not careful in how we progress over the summer.
Around the world, 14.7 million people have contracted the novel coronavirus. Fortunately, 8.3 million have since recovered. There have also been 611,000 deaths. Now, one of the countries hardest hit has been the United States, with 3.9 million infected and over 140,000 deaths. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says it's been difficult for governments to decide when to reopen their economies during the COVID-19 pandemic.
I mean, there's many families affected all around the world. I know here in the United States, you have families that are devastated by this coronavirus, whether it's from the death of someone who got the virus, or if it's the death of a family business, or somebody who lost a job, or somebody who can't go on and provide for their families. So we're seeing both sides of this, and to make that decision is extremely difficult. To look at the numbers and say, well, only had X amount of deaths. Well, that's X amount too many, but at the same time, how many people will be affected by the other types of deaths that we talk about, whether it's suicide or economic hardship, etc.
Lisa will also discuss how some Americans sneaking across the border have brought the virus to Canada. That is coming up after Business News. The U.S. Justice Department has accused 2 Chinese hackers of stealing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of trade secrets from companies around the world. Most recently, the hackers allegedly targeted firms developing a vaccine for the novel coronavirus.
U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Washington, the National Security Division have charged 2 Chinese hackers working with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, including the Guangdong State Security Department, GSSD, of the MSS, with a sweeping global computer intrusion campaign. The campaign targeted intellectual property and confidential business information held by the private sector, including COVID-19 related treatment, testing, and vaccines. The hackers also targeted the online accounts of non-government organizations and individual dissidents, clergy, and democratic and human rights activists in the United States, China, and Hong Kong.
There are many people who are either for or against reopening schools this fall during the COVID-19 pandemic. David Rubin is the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, and he says schools in Israel should not close again, even if there's a second wave of the novel coronavirus.
They're so psychologically damaged by having to go into quarantine, into lockdown. So I think the politicians need to study the research, and they need to see the way that we can reopen our countries safely. That's the key, to open up safely.
It was a hot one today, and it'll be even hotter tomorrow. Full weather details are coming up. Hopefully you had a chance to spend some quality time outdoors today. Lots of sunshine and hot. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at the forecast. Jeanette, we should be over 30 degrees tomorrow.
Yeah, Hal, that's right. Actually, we could even see temperatures higher than that, up to 32 degrees tomorrow. Let's take a look at tonight first, though. We're going to see clearing skies this evening, a high of 13 degrees overnight. We could see a bit of a wind as well, though, up to 50 km/h. And to tomorrow, look at that, 32 degrees. It's going to feel hotter, though, with the humidex. Humidex could make it feel 35 degrees, and that UV index, it's high. It's up to 9, which means get out the sunscreen because it's going to be a sunny, hot day tomorrow. Overnight low tomorrow evening, 15 degrees. And then much the same as we look further into the 5-day forecast, we are going to see a bit of cloud on Thursday with a high of 25. And then look as we start getting into that weekend. Friday, sunshine 26. Sunny skies on Saturday with a high of 25 and 27 the high on Sunday with sunny skies as well. That sunshine is going to remain through Monday as well with a high of 28 degrees. So I am absolutely loving these high temperatures, but just remember to drink plenty of water because dehydration can happen fast, especially under that sunshine. According to the almanac, the average high for this time of year, 26 degrees. We're definitely there this week anyways. The average low, 11 degrees. The high temperature on this day was back in 1945. It was 36 degrees, and the lowest temperature was back in 1953. It was 6 degrees. The sun rose this morning at 5:48 a.m. and our evening sunset tonight, 9:28 p.m. as we are still enjoying those long, lovely days of summer with lots and lots of sunlight. Let's take a look at what's happening across the nation. Over on the west coast tomorrow, sunshine in Victoria with 22 degrees, a mix of sun and cloud. Over in Vancouver, 23 is the high. Calgary could see a 30% chance of showers tomorrow, 25 degrees. They could see also a chance of some thunderstorms in the afternoon and 60% chance of showers up in Edmonton tomorrow. Could see some thunderstorms as well in Saskatoon. Look at that temperature, 30 degrees, 29 in Regina under sunny skies, and a mix of sun and cloud over in Winnipeg tomorrow with a high of 26 degrees. Now, as we get into central Canada here, we're seeing that humidity build up to possibly some thunderstorms in Toronto. 27 degrees is the high. Same thing for Ottawa. They could see a risk of thunderstorms tomorrow. Mix of sun and cloud tomorrow in Montreal with a high as well as 27 degrees. Now, there were some heat indexes, heat warning in effect for Fredericton and Halifax. Those have lifted, but take a look at those temperatures. Still sunny skies, 29 degrees in Halifax. 26 over in Charlottetown, and a beautiful day in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow. 23 degrees is the high with sunshine. There you go. That is your weather.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce is calling on all levels of government to take urgent action to keep restaurants viable throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. The group, which includes Molson Coors and Restaurants Canada, sent an open letter with concerns to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It also went to the Council of the Federation and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. The group is asking federal and provincial governments to extend the rent relief program and for municipal governments to reduce or defer a number of taxes and fees. A Bank of Canada economist says the current economic recovery could look a lot different from the 2008 financial crisis. Michael Kahn says that while the employment rate has fallen due to the pandemic, house prices are recovering and keeping homeowners from filing for insolvency. Kahn, who recently spoke at the Move Smartly Toronto Real Estate Summit, says he's been studying mortgage defaults. Coca-Cola's revenue plunged 28% in the second quarter, but the company says sales began to improve last month as COVID-19 lockdowns eased globally. Half of Coke sales comes from movie theaters, stadiums, and other venues where large people gather. April case volumes fell 25% around the world, but by June, that decline narrowed to just 10%. Coke reported a profit of $1.8 billion for the April to June period, but that was down 32% from a year earlier. The professional networking company LinkedIn is laying off around 1,000 employees as a slowdown in hiring amid the pandemic pressures its business. In a note to employees, CEO Ryan Roslansky says the positions that will be eliminated are in its global sales and hiring offices. He says they're the only layoffs LinkedIn is planning. The cuts represent around 6% of LinkedIn's global workforce. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 20 points on the day to finish at 16,162. The Dow was up 159 points to 26,840. The S&P 500 was down 5 points to 3257, and the Nasdaq was down 86 points to 10,680. Oil was up $1 to $41.92 per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to $1.67. Gold was up a cent to $18.41.92 an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $21.31 an ounce. Wheat is at $236 per metric ton, barley's at $246, canola's at $4.86, and corn is at $232 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 43 cents to $101.85. Feeder cattle were also down 28 cents to $141.33, and lean hogs were up $1.08 to $51.48. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 74.31 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Edmonton Eskimos announced today that they'll be changing their team name. The club made the announcement today after criticism from many in the Inuit community who said the name Eskimo was offensive. The team says its board of directors made the decision to discontinue the use of the word Eskimo. Until a new name is chosen, the CFL team will be known as the Edmonton Football Team or the EE Football Team. It is very important for kids to go back to school in Israel, even if there's a second wave of COVID-19. Now that's according to the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, David Rubin, who has details next with BCN's Jeanette Roche.
Initially, those in Canada and the United States rejoiced after being able to head back to bars, beaches, and sit-down restaurants again. Unfortunately, that headlong rush to the public square has caused COVID-19 to rear its ugly head with widespread reports of spikes in infections. Now, up until recently, one nation has handled the COVID crisis with a great deal of success, but they're now seeing their own second deadly wave of the virus. Joining us to discuss how Israel has handled this pandemic is David Rubin, author and former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. David, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on. And by the way, you are joining us from Jerusalem, which is amazing.
That's right, absolutely.
Now, David, when we first booked you for this interview, Israel was doing phenomenally well handling the pandemic. Cases had dropped significantly due to at least a 2-month lockdown. But then it looked like things took a turn for the worse once businesses opened up again. So, David, what's happening in Israel? Why don't you paint a picture for us?
Okay, well, let me explain what the problem is. In Israel, as you pointed out, we had the lockdown for 2 months, and it was almost total lockdown. People were only allowed to go out to get their necessities, just food, medicines, and essential work, and that was it. So yes, the cases were way down. It was we thought that we had gotten rid of it completely. And then the country started to open up over the span of about 2 weeks. Everything opened up with the exception of the airports. And the problem is that as it opened up, and yes, people were wearing masks and people were doing social distancing, but not everyone was doing it to the extent that they could, and there was minimal enforcement. And before we knew it, everything's spiking again. So the situation now is that a lot of the things that were done before are not being done. In other words, every country has to find a balance between the saving lives, fighting the disease, fighting the virus, and at the same time, not shutting down the whole country. You just can't, you can only do that one time, really. If you do it more than once, you're going to destroy the whole economy. Yeah. And people are going to lose jobs, and people are going to commit suicide, and there are going to be all kinds of traumas.
And that has been happening all over the world, as we've seen, right?
Yeah. So we have here in Israel, there's an organization that I founded called the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, and the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund deals with trauma in children who are terror victims. So what we saw from that is that these terror victims had extra trauma from being locked down for 2 months and being in their homes and not being able to go out. So now that everyone is back, schools have opened up, the center of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund has opened up, people are back to work. We don't want to close down again. Now, there were a couple of things that were done originally that were very good, that were very unique, and that's why we were doing so well, which is that the defense minister at that time had set up a network of coronavirus hotels.
Okay.
And what is that? In Israel, there's no tourism industry now. Usually we have a booming tourism industry. Everyone wants to come to Jerusalem. Everyone wants to see Israel. But no one's coming in because no one's allowed in right now because of the virus. So these coronavirus hotels were set up in all of the major hotels, and all of the lightly infected and moderately infected people were forced to go to those hotels to be treated. So they were removed from the rest of the population, and they were treated, and that's how we got the numbers down. There were over 30 coronavirus hotels at that time.
Wow.
Now that everything's opened up, so these hotels have been closed down. And that was a big mistake. And now they're talking about how to open them up again. And that needs to be done quickly in order to get the rates back down, while at the same time keeping the economy running.
Yeah, that's a tough balance. Now, you had mentioned before that during the lockdown, everything was actually, you said that everything has since reopened except the airports. So that means they're not letting anybody in or out of the country. So if the numbers got down to almost nothing, how did it resurge? Are the borders to Jordan and other neighboring countries closed as well, or is it just the airports?
Yes, all of the airports and all of the neighboring countries, no one other than Israeli citizens are allowed to come to the country, returning Israeli citizens. However, it's natural that when everything opens up and people are together again in crowds, walking in the streets, congregating at wedding halls, at conferences, it's inevitable that there's going to be a spread of infection.
Right.
And then people go back into their homes and they infect everyone in their homes. So the key to solving this problem is not necessarily shutting down the whole economy. It's to have restrictions and to separate those who are infected from those who are not infected.
Yeah, exactly. Now, how many cases are there now in Israel? Do you know? In one instance, I heard that there were 1,400 new cases in a single day, and I think that was a couple of weeks ago. Have you heard the latest?
Well, just 3 days ago, it was up to 1,800 per day, which is a lot in a small country like ours. But at the same time, since then, it's gone down. So we're down to about 900 as of yesterday. But it's in flux. It has to be watched very carefully. But actions like the ones that I just described have to be taken.
Right. So what is the Israeli government choosing to do now? So I've been reading that everything opened up, and now are they being forced to close again?
Well, there are different opinions. Right now, there's a dispute within the Israeli government about what to do. The prime minister wants to shut down. He wants to have a total shutdown again for at least a week or two. And there are others within his administration who are saying, no way, we can't do that. That would be a disaster to close down the economy again. So there are different opinions, and it remains to be seen what's going to be. But as you can tell from everything that I've said so far, I am not in favor of closing down the economy. I think that you need to be aggressive in confronting the virus, and at the same time, not to close down the economy because it creates more problems than it solves.
Mm-hmm. So when did the economy reopen up again? They were closed for a couple months, and then they made the decision to reopen everything, obviously. How long ago was this? Was this about a month or so, right?
It was about 1 month ago. It actually we started opening up in the beginning of June. By the middle of June, everything was completely opened, as I said, with the exception of airports and tourism. But it happened so fast that it was a mistake to do it so quickly.
I see.
And we see the results.
Yeah.
Because we opened up without preparing for the possibility that there might be a resurgence.
Yeah, and they didn't phase into it either, is what it sounds like.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, we're hearing that one of the biggest culprits have been the reopening of schools. So when did Israeli students go back to school, and what's happening now?
I disagree with those who say that that one of the main culprits is schools, because studies show that there aren't too many children who infect the adults. It's usually an adult. When we've had a number of cases, quite a few, of schools closing down because a teacher comes into the school with coronavirus, or a staff member comes in with coronavirus, infects everybody, including all the children, or doesn't infect all the children. But even if all the children aren't infected, the Israeli policy is that you close down the school immediately, and everyone has to quarantine. But look, I think the research is inconclusive about to what extent children infect adults. I don't think that happens too often, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And I think it's a terrible mistake to have all the children go back into lockdown. It's, children are so psychologically damaged, as I mentioned earlier. They're so psychologically damaged by having to go into quarantine, into lockdown. So I think the politicians need to study the research, and they need to see the way that we can reopen our countries safely. That's the key, to open up safely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting what you were saying about the kids being a little bit slower to get infected. When it comes to school closures, is this something that other areas of the world, like Canada and the US, should continue doing as well? I know that there's a lot of controversy actually in the States right now about reopening schools. Canada, there's a similar predicament. What's your opinion on this? I know that you're saying it's important to get the kids back in class.
Well, it's important to get them back in class. It's important to see how you do it and how you do it safely. In Israel, we have this strategy of capsules, of capsulization, that classrooms are divided, and there are plastic, nylon walls put up, barriers within the classroom, which helps prevent the spread of the virus, or perhaps even between the teacher and the children. There are various techniques used. Some places have used masks and found that to be successful. So a strategy needs to be developed, but it's essential that the children are back in school, and we have to think in terms of different places where they are. There are neighborhoods, there are cities that are much more densely populated. In Canada, there are a lot of rural populations that are not densely populated, where social distancing can be easily done, and it should be done. When you're in very dense neighborhoods, we found that those are the areas, those are the neighborhoods that spread the virus more frequently and more widely. So it's very important to have that in mind, and to think in terms of how to open up, not if to open up.
Right, yes. And you have areas in the US right now that are just spiking out of control, one of the worst hit countries right now. So how do you think they should deal with that? They've closed and they've reopened, and some of the governors are calling to close again. How do you handle a situation where the coronavirus is spiking out of control?
Well, look, there are situations where a closure is necessary. But not without a strategy for reopening. You can close down, and then you have to quickly come up with a strategy of how you are going to reopen. Because as I've said, the psychological damage is too great. Psychological damage to children, psychological damage to adults. And we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We do want to save lives, of course. At the same time, we want to heal lives. and we want to heal those that have been emotionally wounded. So yes, separate the infected from the non-infected, and then do everything else that's needed: the social distancing, the washing of hands, the masks, whatever is needed, but not closing down an entire country, because then you just create other problems that will live on for generations.
That was David Rubin, author and former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. We'll see you again sometime, David.
Thank you.
We are not out of the woods just yet globally when it comes to the novel coronavirus. A new report says worldwide deaths have now topped 600,000. To talk more about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again via Skype from Los Angeles. Lisa, why don't we begin in your own country, where cases have exploded in some areas of California and Florida? Florida is reporting more than 10,000 cases 5 days in a row.
Yeah, Florida is the mysterious case, I should say, because it was the place that was not affected. It was a place where people would cite that people are outside, they're at the beach, they're at the restaurants, but they are social distancing, they're staying outside, they're wearing their masks, they're behaving to a certain extent. But because the weather permits for it, from March, they had been in a better situation, rather, if you want to compare it to New York City, for example, to stay, socially distant from one another and to stay outdoors and quarantine to the best of their ability. And many people from the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey area, which was highly affected here in the United States, flocked to Florida in order to, have some semblance of normalcy for the few months that we were under quarantine. But now it has caught up with them. While we are experiencing a second surge in Los Angeles, for example, Florida is experiencing its first and horrific numbers daily, growing by about 10,000 or more, exponentially growing. And, they just weren't prepared for this to hit in the peak of summertime the way that it has.
Now, our country still has its border closed to your country via ground travel for non-essential travel. Canadian officials say 10,000 Americans were recently turned away at the border, Lisa. And for just over 2 months, Prince Edward Island, beautiful little island province here in Canada, went without a single case of COVID-19. But that all changed thanks to a foreign student infected with the virus who entered Canada from the United States.
Yeah, all it takes is that one person, and then it exponentially grows into bigger numbers. And let me be the one to apologize on behalf of the United States to Canada, to all of your viewers, to say we tried to close down the borders, but there are people getting through, whether they are, little tourism here and there leaking into Canada, whether it is the truck drivers who are getting through on the excuse of going cross-border, and of course this student and others who are traveling either overseas or into the United States from Canada and returning home, bringing COVID with them. Look, it's very, very difficult to stop border-to-border transfer, and in this case, we have so much back and forth between the two countries that it was almost inevitable. So here we have the numbers in Canada going up. Because of the numbers in the United States going up, it's a domino effect. And unfortunately, the numbers in Canada going up because we're seeing such a surge here in the United States again, especially on the borders. You also have people driving to Alaska and getting through that way. So there are definitely, the numbers are going up.
You and I have talked before about some of the other countries badly infected with the novel coronavirus, including Brazil, and there was Iran at one point in time. Now, when it comes to COVID-19, Hong Kong is reporting its highest one-day rise in cases. That poor city. I mean, health officials there say they want to do 10,000 tests per day in a city of 7.5 million.
Yeah, Hong Kong is going through a lot, and it is no surprise that their numbers are going up. It's similar to what we saw here, similar yet different, I should say, in terms of protesters on the streets in Hong Kong. You had people going out to either, do some political activism. You had people going out and returning to school and work and going about their daily lives. In Hong Kong, there's a twofold fear right now. first being coronavirus, but second, there's a political fear going on that their lives will be taken over by the Chinese government that is overstepping their bounds politically in order to control Hong Kong to the best of its ability. So individuals in Hong Kong, whether they are young or old or working or in school, are attempting to live life with as much normalcy as possible, and others are trying to escape. They're trying to get out of Hong Kong. They're trying to find haven in other places where they can continue to live with freedom, to study, to work, to live without the tyranny of the Chinese empire over them.
The president of El Salvador recently said that he would postpone the second phase of the country's economic reopening. The Central American country has registered a total of 11,846 coronavirus cases, but fortunately only 335 deaths.
Yeah, their numbers aren't too bad, but a lot of countries, just like El Salvador, are doing this recalculation of the openings. If they have any reason to believe that they shouldn't reopen, if the numbers don't look right, then they won't reopen. Many places, this doesn't really have to do with the number of deaths or the percentage of the population being infected, but it has to do more with, and I'm sorry to say, but the political environment. You are basically making a decision of life or death, and both decisions are difficult. Whether you shut down and create economic death, and I mean that. I mean, there's many families affected all around the world. I know here in the United States you have families that are devastated by this coronavirus, whether it's from the death of someone who got the virus, or if it's the death of a family business, or somebody who lost a job, or somebody who can't go on and provide for their families. So we're seeing both sides of this, and to make that decision is extremely difficult. To look at the numbers and say, well, only had X amount of deaths. Well, that's X amount too many, but at the same time, how many people will be affected by the other types of deaths that we talk about, whether it's suicide or economic hardship, etc.
There's been a surge of COVID-19 cases in Australia's second biggest city that could take weeks to subside despite a lockdown and orders to wear masks. Lisa, health officials say it could take weeks to slow the outbreak when Victoria and the rest of Australia reported single or double-digit daily infections.
Yeah, that's another place where they were handling or tackling the virus extremely well. They were able to keep their numbers down, but again, the second wave has hit them differently. Look, in a lot of places, they were able to handle it well in the first round, but now we're talking about herd immunity, perhaps because not so many people were infected the first time around. It's affecting more people the second time around. In other places, it's because of tourism. It's because people returned home after being abroad or having vacations. Right now, we're having summer holiday. A lot of people are going abroad or traveling, taking advantage of very cheap airline tickets. All sorts of things. Where you calculate all this together, you're seeing a lot more of a surge in places where we didn't see it before. It's difficult to really gauge where this is happening, how this is happening, and when there will be an end to this second wave.
Here at the Miracle Channel, we often talk about the persecution of Christians, Lisa. Well, a new report out of the UK talks about gross human rights abuses against a Muslim group, including forced sterilization. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so at the Foreign Desk, we've been covering this extremely closely to look at the human rights abuses by the Chinese government, whether they happen to be in Hong Kong, against its own people, against the children in China. And now we know, and we've been following, Muslims who in China have been put into camps. They have been marginalized, they cannot work, and now they have been sterilized, meaning they cannot reproduce. They don't want them to reproduce. They don't want any Muslims to live in that country, and they want them to convert or die, meaning they do not want their community or these camps for there to be any children, any reproduction, etc. New footage came out by drone that caught them, abusing these Muslims in the camps, and they were confronted. There was a UK ambassador a Chinese ambassador to the UK that was confronted with this footage, and he was really backing into the answers as to why this is happening. How can China justify this? How can China expect to be in the world economy, in the world society, and to continue these brutal human rights abuses against its own people, as it's continued to do for decades.
I'm wondering if that's also happening to Christians in various parts of China as well. The forced sterilization and these atrocities, human rights abuses, right?
Absolutely.
Multiple people were injured during a Bible study in Chantilly, Virginia, Lisa, over the weekend when an alleged member of the congregation stabbed the church's pastor before being stopped by the area's police chief, who happened to be in attendance. How bizarre is that?
Yeah, talk about luck. Many more people would have been stabbed had this police officer not been in attendance. I included this story at the Foreign Desk in our daily top 10 email this morning for one reason only. It is because today coincides with the Prager University Back the Blue campaign, which we are supporting here at the Foreign Desk, and I personally am supporting. It is to back police officers, the good police officers that do the hard work day in and day out to keep people safe. And the reason I did this is because had this police officer, off-duty police officer, not been in attendance at this Bible study when one of the individuals stabbed the pastor, many more people would have been hurt, perhaps killed. And we have so many police officers who are doing such good work every single day, and their work is not highlighted. But the 1, 2, 3, 4 bad cops that do the awful things that they do, those stories are highlighted, and with that goes the entire profession. You know, if you go to one bad doctor, you don't wipe out doctors. You don't say, I'll never go to a doctor ever again. You don't tell the insurance companies to defund doctors. You call out by name those few doctors that do the harm. And in this case, we should do the same for the police officers. We call them out, and there's no one who hates bad cops more than the good cops. So this is a great example of good cops doing good things, and it's horrific what happened at this Bible study. You know, good people studying the Bible, studying the holy text, and for this to happen. So we're very grateful that this cop was in attendance.
That's amazing. Incredible story. One of Mexico's biggest and most violent drug cartels is posing a direct challenge to the government there with a remarkable show of force. I've seen some of the images, Lisa. Many of the men carrying sniper rifles could easily be mistaken for members of Mexico's own army.
Absolutely. If you see the footage from this, basically a parade that this drug cartel put on, they are so organized, in uniform, marching along, and talk about the amount of weaponry that they have. They're showing force, they're flexing their muscles. And look, right now you see a lot of this going on around the globe, whether it's jihadi groups or drug cartels or protesters of many sorts. People realize that this is a vulnerable time, not just for people who are dealing with COVID, but obviously for leadership. So when you have a weak moment in leadership, you have the bad guys, you know, standing up and saying, look, we're here, we're organized, we have a say, we have a voice, and look, we can take over basically because we have the weapons, we have the organization, we have the support, and we can do this. So this is definitely a bit of chest thumping by the drug cartels and a little foreshadowing of what's to come in Mexico.
Here's an interesting story as well. The United Arab Emirates launched its mission to Mars, marking the occasion having the first Arab in space, and the launch took place in Japan.
Yes, a little bit of connect the dots on the map for us there. We usually don't talk about space race in the Middle East. We talk about a weapons race in the Middle East. But now we're talking about the UAE actually focusing on getting to Mars and launching that from Japan, of all places. But it was a good effort, a well-organized one. And we wanted to give them props for putting their resources, and we know the UAE has a great amount of resources, but we usually hear about the luxurious lives and the skyscrapers in Dubai, but we don't hear about them trying to get to Mars. So good for them, and we'll keep our eye on their progress.
Did they actually say why they wanted to go to Mars?
Yeah, I think they want to they want to compete. They want to be among the best of the best. They want to be among the countries like the U.S., like China, like Russia, who have had some sort of desire. You can add Israel to that list as well. Some sort of desire to add that to their country's resume. And again, good for them for at least having that desire to put their resources there and at least make an attempt.
Now, Lisa, before I let you go, one of the stories we've had on Bridge City News is the amount of wildfires in Central California. How about where you're located in Southern California? How bad is it so far this year?
Yeah, this year, thank God, we've had fewer incidences. We've had a few years where it was absolutely horrific. People we know lost their homes very close by in Malibu and elsewhere. This year we have enough on our plates. We have many other things. We're having a horrific second surge of COVID here in Southern California. And among other things, the wildfires are among things that we worry about year to year, but so far we're doing okay. Fingers crossed that it continues to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay safe, Lisa, and thanks again for your time.
Likewise, thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.